ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Nearly 2 years ago, Erin Patterson served her relatives a beef Wellington, laced with death cap mushrooms for lunch. Now she's on trial for murder. We've come to the regional town of Morwell in Victoria and built a makeshift studio near the courthouse to make sure you get all the details as soon as possible. We don't want you to miss a second of what's sure to be one of the most famous cases in Australian history. Hear a new episode every day on our podcast, Mushroom Case Daily. Follow us on the ABC Listen app.
When tensions flared between India and Pakistan last week, the world held its breath because both nations have nuclear weapons. And while a ceasefire has been announced by Donald Trump, it hasn't stopped the clashes in the disputed Kashmir region. Today, Aparna Pande from the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. steps us through the long-running conflict and explains what could come next. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Aparna, let's come to the history of this conflict in a moment. But first, last week, we saw the most expansive military conflict between India and Pakistan in decades. It was deeply concerning.
Yes, it was. There were drones, there were missiles, there was an escalatory ladder that the two countries went up, there was rhetoric on both sides. And so, yes, even though both countries tried to sort of officially send a message that they didn't want to escalate, capitals around the world were concerned about an escalation between nuclear-armed neighbours.
India says it has launched attacks on 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistan now says it is responding.
Pakistan's military says it's intercepted Indian missiles aimed at 3 of its air bases as tensions between the two nuclear powers continue to escalate.
Pakistan announced its retaliation after accusing India of firing at 3 of its military bases.
All right. So there are, of course, frequent skirmishes over this disputed Kashmir territory. But just tell me what was behind this escalation, and that does date back to April the 22nd.
So on April 22nd, there was a terror attack in Pahalgam. This is a tourist location in Indian-administered Kashmir. 26 people were killed. They were killed by terrorists who targeted them on the basis of their religion. They were asked if they were Hindu or not, and then they were killed.
At least 26 people were killed in the town of Pahalgam. Armed insurgents opened fire on tourists, mostly from India, but at least one was from overseas. More than a dozen remain injured.
This led to an escalation of tensions because India accused Pakistan-based terror groups of this attack. The group called the Resistance Front initially claimed that they were behind it, and the Resistance Front is tied to the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is a Pakistan-based jihadi group. Pakistan said that there's no evidence and therefore it would not do anything. So about 11 days later, on May 6th, India sent in missiles, drones and bombs and bombed 9 locations, which India said were terrorist infrastructure, primarily terrorist camps. In response, Pakistan sent missiles and drones into Indian airspace, and then India retaliated with missiles and drones. And so this back and forth went on for a few days.
So a really serious escalation. But then comes this announcement of a ceasefire by Donald Trump on his social media site. So, I mean, what's he got to do with it? Tell me why that message came from him.
So it's interesting. If you go back a few decades, every time there has been an India-Pakistan war or skirmish, the US has been involved because it has leverage and influence in both countries. But historically, the American president never officially comes out and announces. It's done behind doors, and he lets the two countries, sort of leaders announce. I believe the reason that this happened is it escalated rapidly. Now, since 1998, when the two countries turned nuclear, there has been what is called an escalation, the ladder, that you can stay below the nuclear radar and still escalate on the conventional military front. This time, when the escalation took place, Pakistan, on the third day, basically, for all intents and purposes, was threatening to go nuclear. That is what the Americans saw and the American intelligence saw.
The stakes are so high.
Yes.
So since that ceasefire was announced, though, by Donald Trump, the fighting has continued. There have still been clashes, haven't there?
Yes. So even after a ceasefire is announced, it normally takes 24 to 48 hours for, the message to trickle down to the border. Also because, even before the strikes, there were skirmishes on the line of control. Even without any skirmish, there's often shelling on the line of control. So it's often been a live border. So I believe the ceasefire will last, but we will see this, periodic shelling, periodic firing on the border. It takes a little while for tensions to die down in the subcontinent.
Well, Aparna, let's look briefly then at the history of all of this. But just before we do, just give me a visual. On a map, where does Kashmir sit and how is it broken up?
So Kashmir borders India, Pakistan and Tibet and Nepal. The princely state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947, just part of the British Indian Empire, is divided into three parts today. One part is with Pakistan, one part is with India, and another part is with China.
And this is the disputed territory, though. This is it's not settled.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because in 1947, there were 11 British provinces and 562 princely states. Each princely state was asked to join the dominion that it was territorially contiguous to. Now, Kashmir bordered both India and Pakistan. And the Maharaja did not want to join either. But both countries wanted Kashmir to be a part of them for differing reasons. For Pakistan, we must remember the name Pakistan itself is an acronym which stands for Punjab, Afghania, Kashmir, Sindh, and Balochistan. And so for Pakistan, K for Kashmir is the jugular vein. Without Kashmir, Pakistani leaders have felt Pakistan cannot exist. For the Indian leaders, it's always been that Kashmir, as a Muslim majority state, has always represented India's secular identity, and so it should be a part of India. Now, the Pakistani army was stopped by the Indian army, and where they were stopped, where they met each other and were fighting when the UN Security Council announced a ceasefire, is today's line of control or international border line. So Pakistan has what is called Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, which form Pakistan-administered Kashmir. India has Jammu, the Kashmir Valley, and Ladakh. And then half of Ladakh, China took in 1962, and they call it Aksai Chin.
All right, so it was a rather messy withdrawal from the
Yes.
British.
Yes, very messy withdrawal.
Very messy. And of course, since then, India and Pakistan have already fought 3 wars over this territory.
Yes.
And it's manifested itself in the form of terrorist attacks as well, including that siege of the Mumbai hotels and railway stations in 2008.
At the historic Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, commandos moved in for the kill. They cleared the hotel room by room, hunting for terrorists and rescuing hostages. The sound of stun grenades and bursts of gunfire could be heard for several hours.
So basically, since 1989, every 2 to 3 years, there's a terror attack, a big terror attack inside India, which is traced back to one of these groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, which have historically had support from the Pakistani military intelligence apparatus. And you'll ask me why. And the reason is that from Pakistani military intelligence point of view, Pakistan lacks conventional military superiority over India. The way to force India to negotiate over Kashmir is to put pressure on the Indian government. And these proxies or sub-conventional warfare under a nuclear umbrella has normally been the tactic to try and force India's hand to agree to a conversation and a dialogue. And so the Mumbai terror attack, the 2016 terror attack, the 2019 Pulwama terror attack, and again in 2025. We can go back in history even further to 1992 Mumbai terror attacks, but it's always it's like a film on repeat. Every 2-3 years, there's a big terror attack. There are tensions, there's escalation, and then the global community comes in. Things calm down, then we wait a few years. It repeats.
And the stakes are so high because both of these nations do have nuclear power. So,
yes.
I mean, how significant is that? I mean, what do they have?
So both started, building nuclear capabilities in the late 60s, early 70s. In 1974, India had its first nuclear test. In 1998, both had their big nuclear tests and turned nuclear.
Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in a nationwide broadcast to announce Pakistan's entry into the nuclear world.
Pakistan has been obliged to exercise the nuclear option due to weaponization of India's nuclear program.
Now, there's a slight difference in the two programs. On the Indian side, India has a no first use doctrine, which means that India will never attack another country with nuclear weapons. It will only respond to a nuclear attack. It will never initiate a nuclear attack. Second, India has a proper nuclear doctrine. And third, India has signed the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, which means that while India has nuclear material, it only has a limited number of warheads and bombs because they are basically for deterrence. They are not for use. India also signed the Civil Nuclear Treaty with the United States in 2006, 2008. And one more thing, India's nuclear program is directed at China. Because the two have fought a war, China sits on Indian territory and actually lays claim to a lot of Indian territory. Pakistan's nuclear program is all India focused. They don't have a no first use. They don't have an official laid out doctrine. They have refused to sign FMCT. Finally, Pakistan has tactical nukes. Those small ones which can be on the border. India doesn't. And so the escalatory ladder creates a problem, and this time round too, if Pakistan had launched even a tactical nuke, the response from India would have been full.
Oh, yeah, incredibly scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there has been, of course, a ceasefire reached now, Aparna, but this is not a dispute that goes away, is it?
No, it isn't.
How is this resolved?
So, do we have 3-4 hours to discuss that? Jokes aside, in the last 10 years, there have been no conversations or dialogues. Both countries have actually reduced their diplomatic presence. Their leaders don't meet anywhere. It is very difficult to see a path forward right now until and unless, this ceasefire lasts for more than a few weeks or a few months. And then after that, if the national security advisors meet up and start a back channel diplomacy, then maybe the two countries can at least resume normal diplomatic relations. You need to have normal diplomatic relations, normal trade relations, visas for your people, cricket. I know you will understand the importance of that.
Absolutely.
Bollywood, all of those things. You need to have those people-to-people ties, and those will then build a trust. Now, it doesn't mean Kashmir will get resolved immediately, but I do believe if they go back to having a normal relationship, then over time, Kashmir can be discussed and maybe there can be some solution for it.
Aparna Pande is the director of the Initiative of the Future for India and South Asia at the Hudson Institute, a non-partisan think tank based in Washington, D.C. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Adair Shepherd. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. To get in touch with the team, email us on abcnewsdaily@abc.net.au. Thanks for listening.